Breeze, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Wow, thank you so much, Miriam. I'm really
Yes.
happy to be here.
Yes, and we already got so quickly, so deep into the conversation that I now had to click the record button quickly so that we
Well,
have
that's,
the
I guess,
audience on board.
yeah, that's the beauty of the flow, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is. And to set up maybe a new flow, another one,
Mhm,
I always like to start with the same question.
mhm.
When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
That's really a fantastic triggering question, isn't it? I actually don't really call myself a facilitator, despite that my work has a lot of elements in, fostering flow, maybe, right?
Mm,
So I love the element of like seeing the flow and seeing something beautiful emerge from conversations, from dialogues, even from unspoken movements, sometimes. Um, I just see like, yeah, because I have quite many elements in my work, because, I love the system elements. So it's on the one hand, the depth of the individual exploration, but on the other hand, also the system. So I
mm,
guess, I'm not a kind of a facilitator, or I wouldn't call myself a facilitator in a certain setting, but perhaps really, someone who fosters a system flow. I would
mm,
love that kind of, work to facilitate the flow in the system.
mm. Thank you. And the image that comes up for me, and I heard flow a couple of times and would love to dig a little bit deeper into what that means. And what I hear is you have the individual that you enable,
Mhm.
and the magic only happens if the different individuals meet together in a system. And I would be curious what you mean by system.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess, well, when I mention system, like it's really depending on the setting then, right? So sometimes when there are smaller groups in a leadership development session, for
Mhm.
example, it's almost like these maybe 12 people, 15 people create a system in that container. And as we mentioned previously about the what I find the beauty of the connection in people, often cases beyond the cognitive head connection or brain connection, there is also the beauty of the heart connection.
Mhm.
So I guess in that system, maybe it's really the system or the container that people create. And meanwhile, there's also like larger system or organizational setting
Mhm.
that I also feel quite curious about in exploring how do we create connection, create trust in larger system. So I guess it's really the both.
And then the communication between these two
Mhm.
systems.
Indeed.
And I wonder, to what extent is it the group that defines or sets the system? And what is the role of the facilitator, the host, to actually create this container and to hold it? Because when I hear head versus heart connection in the same sentence as I hear leadership meeting, I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, let me imagine the heart connection
Right.
within a leadership team. It almost sounds like utopia.
Wow.
How do you get them to connect to the heart? How do you
Mhm.
allow them to create a container where they
Mhm.
can connect through the heart?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for the question. And indeed, this is an area that really close to my heart. Um, I can actually start with a story where actually a real life story in a leadership style, like leadership development experience. So it's not a business meeting that I experienced this heart connection. It's actually during a dialogue that a group of leaders come together to explore what is needed, if we evolve towards more self-organization, towards more agile world. What's the role of a leader? What is the identity of a leader, right? What is the story of a leader? So that's really the container that this story happens. And when I personally felt the heart connection, it really started with us using like the narrative identity to actually tell our own story. You know, what is my identity? Especially in light of the agile transformation that we are embarking on, and when we are working more and more in self-organized teams, often cases, leaders might, or how we call them, typical people managers, might actually have some questions like, if we are going on self-organization path and going towards the teal direction, where's my role? And often in that cases, that's when we started to explore what's the identity. And my story that I love to share in that experience was when a group of, I think, 11 or 12 leaders together, and these are country heads or general managers in several countries coming together, sharing their own stories of their transformation journey, of their own transformation as well. And what
personal transformation.
Personal, yes. What touched me the most was actually a leader who has been in this organization for, I think, 30 years, and he shared about his personal crisis. Actually, when he and his his team embarked on this journey, how he felt lost for a certain period of time. It's like, I need to, what is my value, in the sense not coming just from an ego kind of centric way, but really, if I want to serve, where's my role, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of when he shared about his personal crisis in a way, and shared about, he found a coach to actually support him along the journey, and he did many co-creation sessions with his leadership team, right, in figuring out how could they collectively support the country team, right? So that's really the story of the personal kind of and the heart connection that I appreciate a lot.
Beautiful. And what I hear, it works because it's easily then transferable to the organizational context. So if a leader can connect to their own transformation and the pain and the need for an anchor, and the anchor being their own values, and then creating through this own experience empathy for what the organization as a whole and every individual in this organization is going through, then it becomes kind of the foundation of a very valuable leadership conversation. And what I also hear from what you said is that the container that you referred to beforehand is created through a meaningful question.
Indeed. Yeah, that's a really a beautiful way to explore. Because as I tell the story, I also started to reflect. So what are the ingredients that actually created such a container for heart connection, right? And I definitely resonate with the element of empathy, right? And also compassion. It's a level of self-compassion and compassion to the situation. There is a level of connecting to one's own value and actually connecting that value with what we are doing here in the workplace, right? And also the question of what is my identity in this journey?
And I wonder, so what I experienced often, unfortunately, is the moment we open this container and invite, especially the middle-aged, standard, stereotypical leaders, in air quotes, to embark in such a self-reflection and a heart connection, what we encounter as facilitators very often is resistance. I don't want to go there. Why should I talk about myself, right? We're here to talk leadership and strategy and about the organization. No one cares about my own transformation. And just now I was actually wondering whether this might be a symptom of midlife crisis. So when I am not sure about my identity, if I'm insecure maybe, and then I'm invited in such a container, this doesn't feel safe. So how do you prepare that ground? Or have you maybe also experienced something like that? And what was your approach?
Yeah, for sure. And that's also, as you mentioned about, the midlife crisis or resistance. And that's where actually the compassion element for me personally is so important, because we are all human beings and we all experience personal crisis one time or the other, right? So I guess as a facilitator in that creating that container, it's really, how am I opening my heart in creating the container? So that's my first thoughts in answering your question. There's of course an important element I feel, and this is also what I appreciate a lot in my setting. I work in Hoffmann La Roche, this pharmaceutical company, and what I resonate very, very much is the passion for, creating benefits for patients. And in this particular story that I shared was really like a story that happened like last year. And the overall setting of this leadership dialogue is really for the outcome that we want to achieve for benefiting the patients, right? So we set up we call the vision, right? So we're three to five times patient benefits at half the cost to society. So I personally resonate a lot in contributing to this vision. But of course, I understand like how to make this really land into your daily life. That really needs sort of I guess needs the down to earth approach as well, right? And in this occasion, what I shared, this overall company purpose, like this the connection there, perhaps is really the most solid grounding for people to start to connect. And then sharing the individual purpose, I feel that's really quite important.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess I get, even when I talk with my colleagues and people in the organization, and I recently talked with somebody as a scientist in our early development department, and who are surrounded by people from
Academics, yeah.
right? Very, very
I know
cognitive,
these.
brain-driven people. It's like, so I do appreciate, I tend to be quite idealistic, that I really do believe in this and I feel passionate contributing to this. I guess it's really also that level of openness and curiosity and compassion to say, well, let me learn more about your approach. Let me learn about your what actually might trigger you to share something, or what might trigger positively or negatively, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of my approach of using the compassion and curiosity to connect.
Yes, the curiosity, I think that's so important. Before we hit the record button, we were speaking a little bit of what it is that makes a great conversation. And me as a podcast host, of course, I'm obsessed by what it is that makes a great conversation. And I think that leadership teams must equally be obsessed with having great conversations, in theory, I think, because from great conversations comes great insight. And then how can you spark this curiosity for each other? As you just mentioned, it's compassion, and making it relatable.
Yeah. I guess that's really the journey perhaps many leaders are going through, like when you share this, the first thing that came to my mind is actually perhaps a journey inside first, like the really the self-awareness of a person. Because when we are sort of connected with our own purpose, first of all, when we are clear with our own purpose, what is my purpose, right? When a leader, if he or she can be clear with his or her own purpose, then like I feel there's a grounding for this person to actually reach out and connect outside.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, it's first having that level of awareness. It's really, that's also why I appreciate the word self, like the personal transformation. And when we talk about transformation in an organizational sense, it will not happen if there is no personal transformation first. So we even like in during our transformation journey, we even actually like really started to tell the story that it starts with me. So for the leader to explore inward and then actually invite a curiosity for this person, for the leader to connect with his or her with the surrounding.
Yeah.
We even raised the concept that actually everybody is a leader, right? So we actually all have leadership qualities. It's not just the people managers, right? You know, in this case, when I share the story, it happened to be that we have like this container with people who are people managers, and how do they find their identity in this transformation journey, right? Yeah.
Totally. What comes to my mind is the concept that we cannot take people to places we haven't been ourselves. And this can be a tour guide. We apply it very often to the work of facilitators or coaches. And from what I just heard from you, it certainly applies to leaders. So how can a leader guide an organization through a transformation if they haven't been through the pains of transformation themselves?
Indeed. And that's exactly resonating with it starts with me, right?
Yes.
And the personal journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's scary. I think the big question of what's your purpose? That's frightening. I mean, many of us are looking for it until the final day. And then taking maybe the pressure out that the purpose doesn't have to be the big one and the scary one, but it can be a small one to just contribute in a meaningful way and then empower them.
Yeah. And also like, and also it's doesn't have to be exactly the same words, right? With the company's purpose. So take myself as an example, you know, I actually had a conversation earlier today when we were talking about, do we all have to like say this is absolutely my life purpose about patients, and about benefit, about ecosystem, about healthcare. So I must say, you know, for me personally, I can, my purpose when it comes to like I feel very strongly about creating space for reflection, for awareness. Therefore, our wisdom can flow. And in this process, I must say, in the transformation journey, I actually work a lot with employee experience, right? So and what actually brings my passion to life is when we are creating those connections of our own people, right? The hard connections within the organization, then our people can take care of the stakeholders, right? The customers, the patients. So in that way, in this avenue, I'm contributing to the company's purpose, right? And I'm holding very clearly my value and my purpose. So I guess that's really sort of creating, in many ways, I see my role or my colleagues similar to my in the workspace, supporting organizational transformation, is actually creating such space and avenue for people to actually express their value and purpose and make some connections with the organization's value and purpose.
What I hear is that it's less about the aligning or assimilating the values or the purpose. It's more about integrity, so that we hold our values, we are grounded in our personal values, and those that we are working by or living by on a daily basis that we are supporting for the company are aligned, so that we can be persons of integrity by working for that company and pursuing their values and goals. And I would be curious, because you mentioned the word flow a couple of times, and the way how I somehow picture what you just described about creating spaces for heart connection to happen and people to relate to the work they do in the higher meaning. It sounds like flow. It sounds that, and for me, the opposite of flow would be kind of obstacles or making it difficult. So you're not moving forward. So what is it that flow means to you, and how do you create flow or use flow in your work?
Ah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for this question. I guess flow for me, I love the word actually. Flow for me is something that's naturally expressing. So like I do have very strong faith that as human beings, we do want to do better. Like we do want to have positive outcomes. We do want to help others, right? So we do want to do good in the workplace, right? So I guess in many ways, flow for me is to help such a natural instinct of human beings to actually naturally express it themselves, and hopefully create the container for such a expression to land meaningfully into something that we do. Hopefully also create something meaningfully that our customers and our people, in that case of my company in Roche, that the medicine can be used and the medicine can save lives. So it's really sort of starting from this positive intent of a human being to help facilitate the whole process for it to land in something tangible.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And of course, coming back to this topic, and I did, when I look at the topic, heart connection in the corporate world. So even when I talk with our scientist colleagues, they would say, I can hear that you're an idealistic person, right? So the world is not always rosy, as you say. They are not always like that, and there are, especially in times of turbulences. If we look at the world, there's a lot of fear in times of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear and anxiety, even, right, in the environment. So I guess that's why I find myself talking about this even more in times of uncertainty, because like when a lot of things are moving and changing, when a lot of not so ideal situations are happening, for me personally, I need that sort of inner sort of root to be even more deep in the ground and actually flourishing more, because only by doing that I could actually keep my root and my way of being in this world, and also maybe like sending out some positive energy, right? And you can imagine, especially in such turbulent times, leaders in an organization, and that I don't only mean people managers, but actually leaders who are influential, who can be anybody, right? And they can be in the center of their network, connected network, and they can be influential. And how they are with their own inner root and how they show up in the workplace can be very, very important, and people who trust them will take that inspiration, right? And for that, I would imagine it's like an exponential sort of impact that you can create. Anybody can create that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it refers back to the mindset. Right? And when I think of roots, it's almost like a tree. If you have if you have a storm, the tree will be strong enough when it has strong roots going very deep into the ground. And then it won't fall. And then everyone can lean against the tree and feel safe.
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy. Yeah.
And still, I would like to play a little bit the devil's advocate, because I think that on behalf of the audience as well, and out of my own curiosity, the pushback we often get, especially as external facilitators, we come in and we say, okay, we need to slow down to speed up. We need to feel grounded and rooted in our own values before we can connect to the outer values. How do you communicate this process, and how do you help or force an organization to slow down? Because I think, especially in times of uncertainty, and especially for leaders, the instinct is doing. And I can feel it in myself. When I have stressful periods, I start doing things that are absolutely unnecessary. And then I have to force myself to go for a walk and to take longer breaks just to protect myself from myself and to take time to think and not to overdo. And I think that it's something that's instinctive for human beings, that when we actually have to, it's so counterintuitive. That we need to slow down and reconnect to ourselves and others in uncertain times. What is your advice or maybe your magic trick?
Well, I cannot claim any magic trick, but I definitely resonate with the doing. What I definitely observe in our organization in sort of time of stress is like overload, right? So it's like exactly the human tendency of doing more, trying to do more to solve a issue. And when the whole system, imagine, 100, Roche as a whole has 100,000 employees, right? And if you have a system level of sort of frantic doing, then you create overload, and you create a lot of collaborative overload as well when we work with each other. So I definitely resonate, and part of my work in the organization is to like really finding out the causes of collaborative overload on a system level, and explore sort of system level interventions.
Can you give an example?
It's really still in the process. What I guess there are two areas. I wouldn't say two areas, really two dimensions. How from my sort of mind, that we are addressing it. One is actually on the individual level of the depth. So we introduce concepts of holistic well-being. Like we look at the individual's awareness of my own fear. Am I have the fear of missing out tendency, right? Am I actually like in uncertain times, do I want to do 1, 2, 3, 4 before I can make a decision, right? So there are individual tendencies and character or behavioral traits are they present, right? So the individual, that's one dimension. Another, I would like to actually see the system level. Are we having, either organizational structure or culture or collaborative sort of governance model that actually foster a situation like collaborative overload? From the initial findings from some sensing exercises, we did find some, but this is actually really ongoing, and the overload topic is being sort of amplified during the pandemic time, right? Hybrid working and also a lot of changes, geopolitical and sort of market changes. So this is very much present in our sort of daily work. And I also I draw inspiration from Microsoft. The other day, I was reading an article from Harvard Business Review about Microsoft measuring employee thriving rather than just performance. And the thriving is actually a more holistic like element of your whole overall well-being, right? So I think this question that you raise is very much, I think is very much present. Perhaps that's not only just one company. I think the society is kind of battling this issue probably.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess in our in the sort of workshops, for example, that I help facilitate or I host, we for sure have sort of tune-in sessions where we either, I sometimes do sort of breathing exercises or mindfulness exercises to actually like help people to shift their even physiological state. I sometimes would ask people to stand up, to actually do some movement, and
to open the body.
To open the body, yes. And I also very much advocate sort of these micro practices in between meetings. So we have tune in my sessions, I typically do tune in and I do tune like a check in or check out, right? So even in the checkout sessions, it's sort of creating maybe even just 1 minute. If we could help people to actually shift their physiological state, therefore shift their mind state, so that they can be somatically more sort of tuned to their body, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully by doing that, we are opening the doors for heart connections. Yeah.
Can you give an example? What would you do as a check-in little exercise and a check-out exercise? Tune in, tune out.
Yeah, I mean, tuning could be really just very simple, of standing up and observing your breathing. Like really, I might ask people to, if you want to close your eyes, you can. And just really notice the breath coming into your body. And you can notice your lungs expanding and releasing. And you even notice your body almost like expanding and releasing. And just really take a few seconds to bring your awareness into your body. Sometimes I use sound, or sometimes I would use touch, like sensations of your hand. If you would notice your hand touching, you can feel the texture. You could even feel the temperature, right? And you could feel that the warmth coming in the palm. So it's really that moment of bringing your energy from your cognitive mind to your body. Because like it's really, maybe perhaps because I'm rather a kinesthetic person, that I really enjoy the somatic sort of interventions, even micro ones, to actually just notice, right, that moment. It can't just be a split of a second that your mind is coming to your body. And then when we start the conversations, I would also invite like maybe use words that are more sort of connecting, and 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 I guess sometimes I even reflect on myself. Am I kind of being more sort of utopia type of style
The
in
woo-woo.
a corporate environment, right? Well, I mean, as long as this works, why not,
Yes.
right? So, and I was telling a story like this afternoon to a scientist colleague that there was one story that really hugely inspired me several years ago, that a colleague at that time shared with me. He is a engineer in his 50s. He worked 28 years in a German engineering company. So he is a very hardcore German engineer, right? And he shared a picture with me that really so inspired me. This picture is basically a heart holding a hand of a brain. So you might have seen this picture somewhere in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
LinkedIn, right? A heart holding hand with a brain. And this was shared to me by a German engineer with 28 years in the company. And I'm like, this is just so inspiring that we are all human beings. We do not need to compartmentalize
Yeah.
like who is supposed to be certain way, right? And that gave me the faith to be a little bit idealistic in hosting some sessions with, I used to host sessions with room full of PhDs, and I'm the only one who doesn't have a PhD in the room. Um, and I just got many positive signals that kind of reinforced my faith going forward.
It's thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all these layers. Because
Yeah.
I just realized just doing this breathing exercise with you, you allowed me to just land in this space in this conversation differently, almost renewed. And then the experience of touch, yeah, it's short and it basically reminds us of our own body and system. We set the focus differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine as a shared experience, yes, it's a quick reminder of our shared humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether, yes, you said these micro interventions, taking a breath together at the beginning of a session. Maybe it sounds woo-woo, but at the end of the day, we're sharing a moment together and we're realizing, okay, we're all humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, just to add to that, I guess the most weird thing that I've done is with a room of PhDs to eat a raisin for 10 minutes together in one of the leadership sessions. And that's in one of my previous roles. And like I thought, why not? Let's try that. So,
Mindfulness.
it's from the mindfulness 8-week course, right? So you eat a raisin mindfully. So you literally eat that in 10 minutes, from the look to the touch, even to the sound. We literally took the raisin to squeeze it in front of my ears and listen to that. And then we ate that. So and then after we finished the whole journey, so it's a leadership development journey, I received some feedback from the audience. And one of the comments that really left an impression, and he said, we asked, what is the most memorable moment that you have along the whole journey? That was 9 months, right? And he said, I did he use the weird word? So it's like something that he thought was really strange that about the raisin, but actually after 9 months, when he started to like learn a little bit more and more about the mind training and the mindfulness exercise, and he started to appreciate it more, even in his work in research. Because you can imagine, actually, in some of the fundamental research, you really need to have quite a tranquil mind in order to be creative, right? So that was another experience that really started with some very weird moments of eating the raisin for 10 minutes.
And listening to the sound of a raisin.
Yes, I guess the squeezing was really the most weird. and yet, I guess it's really our common humanity, no matter who they are, that they started to appreciate the moment to bring our mind into the present moment and into our body.
Yeah. And this, I would like to point out two things that I noticed. One is the importance of the facilitator to hold the space and to believe, to have this faith. You mentioned the word faith a couple of times, and you being the only non-PhD in front of a group of PhD and they following you. I worked in universities almost my entire professional life, in air quotes. So I know how it is to be amongst PhDs. It is tough. And you need this groundness and confidence in your own work so that they will trust you and follow you. And so this I want to just acknowledge. That's one of the facilitator superpowers, I think, to have this groundness and to believe in the work that you're doing. And the other one is the observation that sometimes we don't know what the impact of our work is, sometimes until months or even years after. So they might walk out and say, this crazy weighs an exercise, what a waste of my time. And then suddenly the penny drops. And there it is, the transformation. Right? So it's very difficult, actually. And this maybe then ties back to where we're coming from, the organizational development and organizational transformation. How do you know where the point is where you can leverage? And how do you know where and what to measure? Because it's, especially these kind of interventions, you're talking about transformation as something so personal, even on a systemic level.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I actually don't really have a definitive answer. I guess, like, when do I know? Often cases is intuition, I must say. Like, I guess in my work in supporting the systemic transformation of the organization, I respond, I guess I listen to signals, and we do a lot of systemic sensing exercise throughout the organization, right? Different type of sensing, just to really understand what's going on.
Can you give an example, just for me to understand what an organizational sensing exercise?
Right. So, for example, we have different ways of sensing. Well, in the recent transformation that we are working on, we have 4 types of sensing, and these are not like they are not pre-designed. I think that's really one thing. They are really emerged. So when it started, I did not know we will do 4 types of sensing. It's just that at that point, when we wanted to know what's really happening, especially from a system level. So first we did was we did survey, so really sort of the typical survey, and we did a Tableau kind of map, like world map of where people are. That's the first type of, okay, so that's maybe how it is. And then we wanted to understand, so what's the deep stories, like what's really happening, what are the concrete examples? So we did focus groups and voluntary, like checking in with a country's leadership team or some ambassadors, actually have deep conversations in 1.5 hours, in-depth conversation in understanding their stories. How does this work relate to how you connect with the external stakeholders, with customers? What kind of impact are you having, right? So these kind of stories, that's second type, and that really emerged from the curiosity, again, coming back to, when we started the conversation, the curiosity in learning where we are. And then it also so happened that we were wondering, are there quiet voices that we are not hearing? Because, when we are sensing, you might hear all the loud voices who are super passionate, but they might be just, 20% of the organization. So what happens to the other 80%, right? So that's sort of the, wonder that again, the curiosity that we are having. So then we invited people to, for a crowd sensing exercise that are quite different, by not defining the topic, just defining a theme and asking people to ask questions to each other, right? So if we do that large scale, we wanted to understand, so what are the topics that people are curious about? And because this is anonymous, right, question and answer, you also avoid this loud voice and this all by writing, right? So it's not by speaking.
Yeah.
The second focus group is by speaking, and the third one is by writing. So then we wanted to hear what are the quieter voices or even the silence, right? So the silence also says something, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we found out. And the fourth way is sort of what we always do, is through the sort of individual conversations and sharing signals. And I, I'm now that I'm sharing these, I realize, oh, in hindsight, we did look quite systemically in understanding what's going on. But at the time, it's really just all emerged. But I guess as a disclaimer, I'm part of part of the Roche that is commercial focused. So it's really 14,000 people. So it's not the whole of Roche that we did this exercise. But that with this organization, we really, I guess the way that the transformation has worked is a lot of emergent like steps that we took,
Yeah.
rather than planned. Right? Yeah.
Which makes sense, because these kind of things, you cannot force anyone. You cannot drag anyone along.
Yeah. And I guess this also reminds me of the word flow, right? So when it comes to like facilitating a transformation journey, sometimes I guess sometimes people use the word change management, right? It's better to have something than not have something. That I admit, it's nothing against change management, but actually what we found out is, in such a complex world, sometimes even chaotic situation, a lot is actually emergent. And a lot is not that you want to control and you can control. So in often cases, we do understand there are a lot of unknown situations. And that's why system thinking is so important. Even when we are sort of starting this journey, it's really the awareness that we can set an intention, but actually, do we really can get there at the point that we want to get there? I don't know. I really don't know. Even now, if you ask me, the things that we are working on, do we definitely get there? I can say we want to influence toward that direction. We want to sense the organization, the key elements that we want to capture in order to go for that direction. But I do not know. I really don't know, right? And I guess that might be really the beauty of trusting the North Star that we want to go there, and actually having the faith of facilitating the flow in that case.
Yes. I was exactly thinking change management, the more appropriate term or process is change facilitation, to make the change easier and emergent by listening, by holding space, and creating containers. Sounds very woo-woo, but I think that's basically what the organization needs, or every one of us needs, to go through transformation. And I wonder whether it's this basic trust, the trust in the process, trust in the organization and the people, that will eventually transform into a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like with inflation. If everyone believes inflation will come, inflation will come. Because everyone is increasing the prices, because everyone is believing that so if everyone believes in the positive outcomes of the transformation, if everyone believes that in a certain way of communicating or working together, then it will eventually arrive, because people just anticipate and then adjust their behavior.
Sure. I guess one thing that is very important is actually not about the transformation per se. It's why we do that. I think that's what I hold very dear. We don't do
Thank
transformation
you.
for transformation's sake, right? So yeah, right. So it's really like, why are we doing that? What are the pain points that we try to address, right? And in this case of the work that we are doing now, we do recognize, especially in light of the COVID, the global pandemic, how much the global healthcare system is under strain. How many like population still not being able to access medicine, you know, and like I remember, I just happened, I think yesterday there was a global conference that Roche was holding. One sentence that really caught my attention is like, where you live should not determine if you live. This is really touching because there are, areas that healthcare ecosystem is under super strain, and people are dying if they don't have that access, right?
And
So yeah.
yes, sorry, and we're not talking about Africa necessarily. I saw the figures that in the UK, the difference in life expectancy at birth between the richest and the poorest quintile is about 8 years.
Yeah.
We're talking UK.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. And that's just just that's even the UK, right? So
yeah,
so then we, if we think about the other vast
yeah,
areas, and whenever I think in that, and also this is actually how I find my sort of energy when I feel down, right? Of course, this is it's not the most easy work to do if there of course there are a lot of negative energies still people's fear. But whenever I I meet, I do meet people who are, patient group advocates. Whenever I hear their story, there is really this very, I guess, this again coming to this heart connection that I do feel emotionally connected. That if my work somehow in a small way could support the facilitation of the flow of supporting, the healthcare ecosystem to evolve, support, the medicine. In many cases, Roche medicine is about life saving, right? So in many of the oncology space, so in that sense, if that can contribute a little bit to that, that feels meaningful.
and it makes me think whether heart connection is always driven by purpose. If we know the purpose, and thank you for pointing that out. Yes, transformation without purpose, without knowing and understanding the purpose, is dangerous. And I think once we sense the purpose and connect to the purpose, it must be a heart connection, because purpose is something so personal.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah.
I guess meanwhile, I'm also, I guess, holding the compassion for myself and for others, that we do not need to demand that for everybody. Like I guess, especially me working as a coach in the organization in this whole process, I really want to connect with people where they are. I would love to understand, like, what's your story and what's actually your fear. What's your passion? What brings you joy? So I guess, again, coming to this curiosity as well in this whole process, in a way, is that it's okay. It's okay that I don't know for the moment. And we have our individual stories, all of us. And I guess as long as we actually can find meaning in what we do, then that's okay. So like, this inclusiveness for me is also very, very important. I certainly, I know for myself that I tend to be very passionate, and I'm like almost like talking utopia. And the thing is, utopia might not connect with everybody, right? So even in the adult development theory, that it's not like it's probably not going to be the case for everybody that you just talk that way, right?
Mhm.
So for me, the inclusiveness, I guess, coming back then also to the compassion
Mhm.
and curiosity, and I hope also by you know, me and colleagues like me who work in transformation topics, and leaders across the organization, that I hope that we all aspire to hold such compassion for self and for others, to hold curiosity, and to hold this inclusiveness, that it's actually okay,
Yeah.
and then facilitate the personal transformation journey for people.
Yeah. Sounds as if again, yeah, it's the open heart and the being rooted in your own values. And then you can invite also doubt in, or you can be compassionate with doubt. If you have your own fears and doubt that you have to deal with, and if you're not sure, then it's difficult to hold the space for further doubt.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, indeed. And that's actually, it reminds me of this very, very wise words from Buddhism. There was this theory of four immeasurables. The immeasurable meaning, like, you cannot, it's vast, it's so vast that you cannot measure,
Mhm.
right? And the first one, it goes like that: I wish everybody, in all sentient beings, to have happiness and its causes for happiness. And the second one is, I wish people to avoid suffering and the causes of suffering. And the third one is, I wish everybody to be joyful. And then the fourth one is, I hold equanimity, that no matter what kind of being, that I hold the equanimity. And what you mentioned just triggered this thought about this vast, immeasurable element. Because actually, as leaders in today's organizations, we are holding a lot of polarities. In the society in general, actually, we are holding a lot of polarities. And I think a lot of the world's problems started with, if we are polarizing so much, right? And what you have just really mentioned triggered these thoughts about the immeasurable. Like, if you hold vast, the inclusiveness, then you bring positive energy to the world, I guess. Right?
Yes. And to be okay with this polarity.
Mm.
Because I think the goal is not to make everyone agree or to change their mind. I think we cannot make anyone change their mind.
Mm.
But to be okay that there are polarities, to listen, to be curious to each other, and maybe to agree that we cannot agree, but how can we coexist? How can both be true?
Yeah, indeed.
That's this brain yoga, right?
Yeah, and how can, like, I guess, really, how to transcend this polarity in many ways. It's yeah, like, how to transcend. And yeah, this, what triggered in me was this novel. There was a novel called Flatland. That I wonder, I might have mentioned before, the Flatland is really a very delightful little novel to read. Is that if you're living on the flatland, that means all you see is two-dimensional. That's your world. And then suddenly a ball came. A ball, when the ball came, people on the flatland, they could only see a circle. They cannot see the dimension. But this is a ball, actually, right? So how could we invite people to actually jump out of that flatland when dealing with polarities in this world? How could we actually elevate our view to transcend those polarities and find ways to be inclusive, right? As you say, coexist, and
Yeah.
all be and find the joy in our own way.
Yeah. I think the only way is through experience, because arguments very, very rarely actually.
That's coming back to today's topic, isn't it? Because often cases, arguments only land in the cognitive brain.
Mm-hmm.
And you just talk brain to brain, and then after this conversation, nobody changes. It's still very, very much cognitive.
Yeah.
The experience is different. Often cases, how I experience when I host a workshop, sometimes I really, if when you talk about measurements, right? Sometimes I like, evaluate my experience by my experience and sensation. Do I actually feel a heart connection physically in the workshop that landed or not? Sometimes sometimes it didn't land, right? Sometimes people really stay in the head. It's also okay. But actually often cases, some things do land.
Yeah.
So that's the experience rather than the brain.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Rather than just the cognitive.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I love it that you can sense it, whether you felt the heart connection. And I think, yes, that's part of sensing the room as well, right? Because we do get some feedback, non-verbal feedback from the energy in the space. What's your number one facilitation challenge?
I guess it's really related to, whether I could help the participant, or not help, but actually I could create the space for them to drop to their body and their heart. The biggest challenge would be if people are so much hanging on the brain argument.
Yeah. And how would you guide them slowly? So, for instance, I had an exploration call with a facilitator of dancing experiences. So, and we spoke about the energy that the group brings into the space and how it's then the role of the facilitator to transform this energy. And I hear something similar in what you just said, where if you have an entire, I can imagine if there are only a few who are only in their head, then it's easier to create this heart connection. But then if you have a critical mass that is in their head, how do you get them to their heart?
I guess that's really depends. There's no sort of magic wand, I guess. And that really depends on the setting. So if this is, if this is sort of a project-based work, then of course some conversations before in understanding and sort of really connecting individually, that might help. If this is a setting that is sort of people coming together in a leadership development session, I guess I would try various things, including having people dance, like well, we did. I think in some of the sessions we did sort of like get people just stand up and get some music to dance.
Beautiful.
And, and I remember, I think one very memorable experience was my own team in the transformation office team in Roche. I was not the facilitator, but the facilitators actually asked people to share their most memorable song. And then they played it was 3 days. And then during the breaks, we played the song and we will guess who that song belonged to. Of course, I mean, my song was quite easy because I'm from China and I have a super Chinese, very, very obvious Chinese song. And I just realized, we have different senses, right? And the senses of the sound triggered emotion could actually really shift the room, and I guess in many ways being quite kinesthetic, I'm definitely learning in more somatic ways, in maybe sound, maybe the movement, sometimes the words, right, to support people. I guess the key thing is how to shift their state, like just really bring them from their brain to their body. And then maybe some small doors will open.
Yeah, like just Give yourself a hug.
Yes.
Tap yourself on the shoulder.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice one. And another question that I enjoy asking every guest is, what makes a workshop fail in your experience?
I don't have that much experience, I must say. For my failure experience, I'd say, I guess in the beginning, one big lesson that I learned was too much attached to a result. You know, and or too much wanting to help, or too much wanting to do something, and that actually was not really that helpful. So it's like playing the instrument. It's not too tight, but not too loose. It's really that where the flow might come. It's a level of certain sort of tightness in supporting, gearing to a goal, but also a certain level of relaxation, and just not really that attached to the outcome.
Yes, and it brings back to my mind where we started before hitting the record button, speaking about dance.
Yeah.
And how the dance is it's guided, it's a flow, you sense in which directions, but it's not pre-scripted.
Yeah, indeed. And I often experience the most beautiful and creative moments that's completely not planned. It's really just emerged. And that's why I'm a big advocate of creating space for heart connection, because I feel that's from my experience. When such environment exists, when we create space and when people have heart connection, people tend to be more likely to be in flow. And then that's where creativity tend to, appear more frequent than otherwise.
Yeah.
And in often cases, creativity can mean a lot of things in many different ways. Yeah. So I that's just perhaps why I'm just keep advocating space for heart connection. It's creating the foundation in a way.
Yeah, and the space for stuff to happen, and it fascinates me how intangible it is, and still how much when it happens we know that it happens.
Yeah, the intuition, I guess, that we create, that we connect. Yeah. And I must say, I feel very encouraged. I guess I'm just also advocating for my environment in Roche, that I really appreciate many leaders actually appreciating this. Like even when we started to discuss about like heart connection in corporate, almost not very fitting, right? And I do appreciate that I met quite a number of leaders who actually went through their personal journey, authentic leaders who actually can appreciate an intangible concept like this. That they're not like boom, 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 we need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and we are done. Like it's not just that. So of course, Roche has a lot of very doing centric people, because that's the business performance, right? This is a commercial organization.
It's yeah.
Yes, and it has been successful in the doing, for sure. Even in our badge, on the back of the badge, we say doing now what patients need next, right? It's also doing. I totally appreciate that, and I guess what I appreciate a lot is there is like there is a certain level of appreciation on the being and the doing, right? So even in our own team, in the transformation team, that we talked about the being and the doing both.
And I think I would be very curious to hear from you. the thin line of employees understanding it wrong. Or it's about the intuition, it's about the being. So doing is overestimate. How not to confuse and fall into the trap of taking it easy. Because it's different. You can be ambitious and hardworking and still being in the flow and having a heart connection, right? You can have very serious conversations and action and being result driven and still having this strong focus and heart connection and compassion.
Yeah.
And it can be misunderstood.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really a great question. How I aspire to work on that is actually facilitating people's inner reflection and their inner wisdom. Like it can be a bit intangible, but how I aspire to make it more tangible is develop, like I see my role as a catalyst, right? A catalyst to let's say facilitate the journey. It's not my job to tell you you have to understand this way or that way. You know, you have your own way. I really have the deep trust that everybody is like how to say that, resourceful, creative, and whole. This is what I borrow the words from the collective coaching. You know, they say everybody is inherently creative, resourceful, and whole. I have a deep trust in that.
Yeah.
So what I aspire to do is I catalyze by maybe, you know, telling stories. I you know, support. We have this concept of learning organization, and we created a workbook full of reflective questions, supporting people to build learning communities, and supporting them to find their own way, to find their own inner wisdom, and that is how I feel we could enable the system. It's not injecting something, it's rather enabling the system to actually generate themselves.
Yeah. Empowering also through trust and providing the ecosystem. Thank you. If someone feels inspired and would like to induce a little bit of transformative guidance, the heart connection to their organization, what would be your advice to them?
I can hardly say it this is advice. I guess the first thing is really starting with the inside, right? You know, starting with yourself, in connecting with your heart, in maybe exploring your purpose and finding your inner wisdom. That's one thing. And again, holding the depth of the individual, but also holding the width of the system. You know, I feel very strongly on both. Actually, it's not separate. It's actually both.
Yeah.
The depth of the individual in starting with yourself, and also the width, the overview of the system simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to learn more also from, you know, the audience. I guess I need to say a disclaimer, because I realize, you know, thanks to your sort of very inspiring questions, I'm sharing my view and my passion, and I'm very aware that the reality, you know, might not be all rosy. Like my experience has also not be all that great. And I guess it's really just sharing this passion, and it's always a learning journey. So I like, for me, it's
Yes.
totally I'm
Yes.
gonna learn something new all the time. Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. And I think to share this optimism and to hear your passion and how this is done in your case and how you approach it is inspiring. And that's why I invited you.
Thank you.
And one final question, because I parked it in the beginning and I didn't get to ask it. So we talked about the individual level, and then the system. Where do you, for me, a system is kind of round. It's like a network. It's interconnected. And where do you start? How do you change a system?
Right.
And I'm aware that this could kind of start an entire
Right.
separate episode.
I'm going to be concise as much as I can. I guess it starts with transparency. That's how I understand. It starts with transparency of the system to first understand what is the system. So we did the organizational network analysis and really drew a map of the system of this unit that I'm in, and together with my colleague, starting with the transparency and understanding what's there. And when we identified some central collaborators who are in the center of the network, we started to do some ground research in understanding their stories. So what makes them successful in navigating the system, and what are the behavioral traits, and how could we actually multiply that for the system? So really holding, if we use the garden analogy, that I serve as a gardener, right? I support the soil to grow so that the plant can grow themselves. So a lot of the work in the system level is on the soil. It's not really like I take something and put it there, but really supporting, starting with the transparency of the network, starting to understand what's the behavioral traits, how to amplify that and catalyze that. And all these is through almost like catalyzing the soil.
Wow. Thank you. I'm so glad that I asked a question, because I can then almost imagine that what comes up if you look at who made a career in the organization. So how did these paths and what behavior drove this career? And is this consistent with the values that we claim? Is this consistent with our bonus system?
That's a great question to explore, yes.
To then see the consistency of the system, and does it actually provide the ecosystem to drive the transformation that we wish to see? Still
a long way to go, for sure.
Yes, and otherwise it would be boring and everyone could do it, right?
Yeah. So that, I guess that's really the beauty of doing this work. I guess I get a lot of fulfillment in doing this work. Again, both the depths and the depth of the individual awareness and wisdom, and the width of the system understanding. I think I find a lot of satisfaction in seeing these and how these, emerge. And I guess being a very curious person, I find it fascinating in working this way, and somehow the heart connection, that really lies quite central in the work, because I feel that is often cases the starting point of building the trust of self and the system to actually be able to open up and open for transformation.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with me on behalf of the audience.
Thank you as well, Miriam, for giving me such an opportunity to learn and to share. Yeah.
Beautiful. Dum, 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 dum. That's the end of my podcast jingle.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thank you.